All right, we are live for episode 3 of Creative Corner. I'm Max, your host, and today I'm going to be joined by Nick. For those of you who don't know what Creative Corner is, Creative Corner aims to bridge the gap between leaving a place of study and landing that first job within the design industry, whether that be in an agency, freelancing, working as an in-house graphic designer for a particular brand, or just something in the design industry. So Nick, as my illustrious third guest for episode 3, if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself and what you currently do.
Cool. My name is Nick. I'm 30 years old from Worcester, and I'm a vector illustrator and graphic designer.
Awesome. So what we normally do to start off the podcast is discuss your story on where you started versus to where you are now. If you just describe that process for us in terms of where it started. Were there anything were you inherently creative as a kid? Is that something that developed over time? Was it can you put it down to one specific moment? Was there any twists and turns in that journey where you thought you might not be going down a creative route? Talk me through that.
Well, from an early age, I never anticipated being here now. This is definitely not the route I originally planned to take. I've been working in catering for well over 14 years now, I think.
Right.
Something like that. But originally I wanted to be a chef, and I went down that sort of creative route, and I did enjoy it for a while, but I think just the industry itself got a bit demanding, and it became less about cooking and more about, TripAdvisor.
Right.
So that kind of made a turn for it, which was really bad. And then I decided I wanted to take footsteps in my dad's path. My dad's a plumber.
Okay.
So I went on to do electrical engineering. But again, it became one of those, by the time I finished that, I was too old, and people didn't want to take on someone my age. They'd rather take on someone younger. So I decided to take down a route which I've always enjoyed. I've always been creative, but I've not really pursued it so much until I decided one day. I thought, at the time I didn't know what graphic design was. I knew roughly how to do Photoshop. I had a basic understanding of drawing, and that was the be all and end all. So I decided I wanted to put a portfolio together of just whatever I could to try and get into university. Which ended up the case. 4 years at Worcester University with yourself. But yeah, and now here I am, and it's a completely different lifestyle to what I originally had in mind, and it's phenomenal. And the community of people that surround me is just insane.
100%. Yeah, we've mentioned that before on the podcast, how designers and artists can collaborate together and hype each other up and share work with each other. It's just a completely different way of working with one another, despite not really knowing who's on the other end and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've met some amazing people from all across all walks of life and all across the globe. And I think Instagram, despite I have my reservations with it at the minute, but it's just an amazing community of people. Absolutely brilliant. And they're also supportive, and you get people who are at the top end of the spectrum and the people who are just starting, and they're all the same. We're all one being, so to speak.
Yeah. It's quite interesting how you've gone from catering and then electrical engineering and plumbing. These are all very quite hands-on, sort of tactile skills. Do you reckon that sort of aided you in getting into the design industry, or being creative a little bit more, but in a little more actual physical sense?
I'm not sure how to answer that, to be honest, because I mean, it is tactile in its own, I guess, but it's a bit more imaginative than, a lot more imaginative than, I'd say, electrical engineering. Electrical engineering is obviously just mostly science and applied knowledge, whereas chefing, I guess, is probably the biggest, the closest gap between the two, because I worked in fine dining for quite a while, and You have to have a sense of imagination to be able to piece elements together the same way that you would in design or vector illustration.
Yeah, the composition of a plate is that similar of a composition of an artboard in Photoshop or Illustrator?
Exactly. You eat with your eyes, you know.
There you go then. So like being a chef, and what made you, because you sort of mentioned that it was a bit more demanding and more about TripAdvisor. So what made you sort of ultimately, because you're in chefing still while you're at university, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So what made you, because you still had like a slight passion there for it, or was that something just to get, a little bit of money in while at university? Like how did that enter, and how did that leave, and how did design sort of take its place?
I think there still is a passion for it. I don't think that ever died, so to speak. I think I just I wanted something different, or it just wasn't for me anymore.
Right.
Like I still do it now, but I've massively reduced the amount of time that I put into it.
Yeah.
And the time that I do it now, I do enjoy it more. But 50, 60-hour weeks in a kitchen is a lot. It's hard work, very hard work. So
we've both worked in sort of catering and hospitality and that sort of thing. And I think having known chefs, I've not been on the chefing side of things. I've been more on the waitering side and bar work side. But having spoken to chefs and that sort of thing, I remember you telling me a story of someone who'd been in the army, and like the stress of the kitchen like brought them to tears.
Yes.
Because of how demanding that was, which I think is quite interesting, to go from being shot at essentially to then a kitchen which is just a high demand of service on a busy shift. It's not.
This is what I couldn't understand. When it happened, I could not understand what was so agonizing about that environment. Because I get it's hard and it's stressful, but I couldn't think of anything more stressful than having your life on the line. So I think there's a rather big comparison between the two.
Yeah, it's a really big difference, isn't it? So Nick, your work and your style discuss your style, how it changed. Was it something that you developed over time? Was it like something that you saw and you're like, this is the style that I want? Is it still developing? Are you happy with it? Talk about
that. My style originally, I kind of wanted to keep in the food and drink industry, and I wanted to do food and drink brand design. Now the niche in itself is well, there's not a lot of it as far as it goes, but I also limited myself, which then the potential for more clients or other types of work just greatly reduced. And it's hard to get into the food and drink industry because you've got to shoot for the big names, otherwise you ain't going nowhere.
Otherwise it's nothing.
No, I mean, I did a couple of projects for small places like some breweries, but even then now they've been going for 2-3 years and they've only got a following, or that I know of about 500 people.
Yeah, I think with smaller businesses, you sort of run the risk of doing great work for great people, but also at the same time, if they haven't got a following, the chances are that might only be one piece of work. They might not be a returning customer, like for your particular design skills. Do you think that because you're not necessarily limiting yourself, but like niching down into something, did you feel the need to then undo that niche and explore different paths?
Yeah, kind of. I think I came to a realization that I just wanted to do what I want to do. And in that circumstance, like now, for example, vector illustration, I mean, I've always said to myself, I want to be a graphic designer. I want to make logos. I want to make these brochures and, leaflets and that sort of thing. But now I've gone down a completely different route and I'm doing vector illustration, which is rewarding. I enjoy it. And I still get to do the things that every that's why I label myself as a graphic designer and a vector illustrator, because I still do those things. I'm still make logos, but it'll be more of like a mascot logo than like a monogrammic logo. Those sorts of things. But yeah, I don't think that yeah, as I said, I just wanted to get to a point where I want to do what I want to do. And, you know, that when you have a style, yeah, okay, again, it's similar to having a niche. It's you are limiting yourself, but there are people out there that like that. And I'd rather be good at one thing than be a jack of all trades and be sort of okay at everything.
Yeah. I think it's an ongoing discussion within the design industry and just at any level, really. That do you limit yourself to just one niche, or do you try and be a jack of all trades? And there's like arguments that saying trying to be a jack of all trades limits your value, so you get paid less. While others say, jack of all trades, which means you can do everything. They only have to hire one person than hiring three. Obviously, you've expressed like just doing your own thing, which I think has obviously played a part in sort of how you've grown your Instagram a little bit. Do you want to talk about that and sort of how you've built your following a little bit? Because you've got a few thousand followers as far as I'm aware. So how has that sort of gone from, just friends liking the page to now what's begun to become a mass of people?
This is sort of a interesting topic that I have a lot of people ask me questions like, how do you get so many followers so quickly? Yeah. Now, if I had the choice and I could go back to uni and say I had the knowledge I have now of the design industry, if I had the choice to go back to uni again, I would take business, because the hardest part of walking out of uni is, well, for me, they teach you things in uni, like they taught us things in uni that I think were great. But equally, it doesn't set up for how to run a business. It teaches you how to deal with the client. There was ample opportunity for that. We had all the time to talk to clients and that industry and work under pressure. But when you come out of it, you've got to start crunching numbers and figuring out how you get your name out there. That's a completely different ball game. Yeah. So with Instagram, I decided with Instagram that, again, it was going back to, I just want to do what I want to do. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. Art in any form is subjective. Yeah. I'm not expecting everybody to like it. It's the same with like phones. Some people prefer Apple, some people prefer Samsung.
Yeah.
But I then had to do research into how to, essentially influence market through Instagram, which involved hours and hours and hours of reading up different articles and stuff like that. So it hasn't just been a popularity thing.
It's never an overnight thing, is it? It's weeks, months of research and planning and scheduling and looking at best times to post and that sort of thing. I've discussed this a little bit on other podcasts, but it's sort of like it took for me building, like going freelance and like trying to build an Instagram following. It took the design out of the design and replaced the design with entrepreneurship. And I didn't go to university to be an entrepreneur. I went to university to be a designer. And when people say, "Oh, Max, you should go freelance, you should do this," I'm like, it's really not what I want. I can tell you now, it's not what I want.
See, now I'm the complete opposite. It is exactly what I want. I want to, obviously, considering my age now, I've worked for people for a very long time. And now I want to work for myself. Mm-hmm. I want to dictate how everything's done, and that's my choice. And I'm enjoying it. I love it. Yeah. But the thing is, like with the Instagram stuff, this coronavirus has been a blessing for me because it's given me opportunities I never had before and I never had the time to do. Yeah. But pre-lockdown, I was doing 40 hours at work and then I was coming home and doing 40 hours. So when it came to the point of being stuck at home, having nothing to do, that's when everything just went straight up.
Wow. So because you were putting a lot more time into it because you had the time, and two, because you were enjoying it more. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had the time, I had the resources, and now Now it's a bit of I'm on a sort of level now where I don't want to build a following, so to speak. I want to build a community.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to just have followers for the sake of having followers. I want to have people who interact, who I can talk with, share my experiences with, and you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because obviously you look at, you know, celebrities that have like millions of followers, and obviously celebrities are gonna have their own friends they talk to and stuff. But in terms of like, if you're a designer, if you're maybe a startup band or an artist, perhaps, like, you're going to want other people to talk to and take inspiration from and leave feedback on your work.
Yeah.
I think that if I was going to like try and push my personal Instagram to have lots of followers and stuff, that would be the sort of thing I want to create, like a place where designers can come together and share and comment on each other's work, and, you know, check each other out, and, you know, potentially work with each other and create opportunities together. So I think what you're doing, obviously, you've come to that point now. I think if let's say we have another conversation in a year's time, it'd be interesting to see how much that has changed. Because I remember seeing on your Instagram sharing something about like 4,000 followers. You know, thank you everybody. And then it was like 2 weeks later, it was like 7,000. I was like, what? He's obviously doing something correct. So it must be quite impressive to know that you're gaining followers, but also like that realization of, hang on a sec, how many of these followers are actually, you know, interacting, and, you know, are my followers valuing what I value? Do they have different values to me? Are they going to be sharing? Are they going to be liking? Are they following me to help me out? Are they following to help themselves out? What, you know, sort of trying to get an idea and sort of put a face to the username, perhaps.
Yeah, well, this is exactly it. Like, I don't feel like anybody, if you're working freelance, I don't think you should just be a logo in a business. You need to be a person, you know, because behind every computer is a person, and then you become relatable. You know, I've done stuff on my Instagram. I share personal experiences, the fact that I play instruments, and for some reason, I don't know why, considering these people are all like-minded design individuals, but they just seem to love little things like that.
Yeah.
And because I guess it just shows a side of somebody that you wouldn't see, and it makes you less of a business person and more of a human.
Yeah, more of a, this is me doing what I do, you know. Here's me playing guitar, here's me, here's like a book that I'm reading at the moment, you know, or, you know, like that. Yeah, I think that's great. Like what you've said, we've spoken before on like previous podcasts about like this sort of thing, and sort of saying, you know, this is who I am, this is what I do. I'm not just doing my design work. I'm also a guitarist. I also do this, you know. I think it's really important for freelancers and probably startup designers and illustrators, you know, creatives, shall we say, who are doing this, is like, don't just say that you're a designer. You know, if you have something else, like let's say you're really into reading, or you're watching something on Netflix perhaps, and you want to share it, like just go ahead and share it, because it helps bring that level down of, you know, actual, you know, let's say someone's got 300,000 followers, it brings that level of 300,000 followers down to just one person who's like, this is who I am and this is what I do. You know, I hope you're the work that I'm putting out. I think something else that I mentioned on Celine's podcast is how in the culinary industry and, you know, food and drink industry, it's the way other chefs get better at what they do is they share their recipes, they share their work, they share what they do. And then that's picked up by other chefs and other people in the industry, and just be like, okay, I really liked this recipe. Here's how I've changed it. Here's how I've adapted it. Perhaps I've used this instead of this. This is the effect that it's had on it. We see like different challenges like that, and sort of opportunities approach where people like not copy each other's work, but take inspiration from each other's work and do it in their own style, or create a story perhaps. I just think that's really important. So like as someone who's spent quite a lot of time in the food and drink industry and chefing and stuff, like, do you reckon that's true? Is there truth to the fact, or do you reckon it's something different?
Absolutely. I think, you know, I mean, my style, for example, is an appropriation of 1930s rubber hose.
Right.
You know, and again, that all started from doing basic flat design illustrations, and then as my skills evolved, and I picked up things from other designers by looking at their work.
Yeah.
You know, and trying to replicate it, and then trying to appropriate it, and then you know, then now I've got a different sort of skill set than I had before in terms of my illustrations. And it's exactly the same with catering. I know, I completely agree. You know, all recipes are passed down from the person above you, and then you go and you take them and you change them and you make them yours. You know, by adding different things, taking components away. You know, and I think that's where I said earlier, I think that's where the creativity comes into it. What aspects can you change and remove and replace?
You spoke a little bit there about inspirations. Are there any designers or certain styles that inspire your work?
Off the top of my head, so you've got people like the Max Fletcher animation studios, all the people who work around things like, well, the Disney studios, for example, the old school Mickey Mouse.
Like Willie and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And those sorts of people. And then there's more like there's more outlandish designers that I quite like, which Nowhere Land Supply was one. Off the top of my head, I can't remember them. There's one illustrator I've got here, Taka Illustrations. He's got a very unique style.
Okay.
And it's very cool. But those sorts of things. I find I think the best thing about design is you can find inspiration in all things. You know, I saw you did a podcast with Zach and Ross.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, obviously going to university with them, they've got two very unique styles themselves, and I love both their styles. But personally, for me, it's not a style I would choose.
Yeah, I think especially at university and any area of study, it's sort of like you're going to be working with people along the same project. You've been given the same brief, but your approach to that brief and how you've interpreted that brief is going to be very, very different. And that gives you an opportunity to look at your own work and see how that compares to somebody else's response. And okay, does their work do it better? Does your work do it better? You know, how is that style affected? How you've understood it, and notice sort of the differences, but also the similarities in which how you've come to a conclusion. I think that's really important to take in. Like, know that your style isn't going to be not necessarily the best answer, but it's going to be a answer, and somebody else's solution is going to be another answer. And it's up to the client or whoever you're doing the design work for, whether it be for yourself or you know, for whoever, is their decision to say, okay, this is what I believe this is going to work for. And they might be able to give you some feedback about how different styles, or maybe you've used a certain color scheme or certain imagery has affected that. So yeah, we spoke a little bit, Nick, about doing going 40 hours a week and then coming home and doing another 40 hours a week, sort of flip-flopping between the two. Is that something that you had to get into like a flow state for? Can you work for like long periods of time? Do you often take breaks? Do you how do you sort of maintain that workflow? Because obviously if you're doing 80 hours a week, that's a hell of a lot of hours to plug into. And how do you sort of balance between what would have been your full-time job and your side bit, sort of like how do you find that balance?
I'll be brutally honest, there was no balance.
Okay.
There was absolutely no balance. I've changed the way things work now, but when I started everything, I wanted to post consistently. I posted at the same time every day, 7 days a week. And that means I'd have to have content every day, 7 days a week. And I did that.
Isn't it?
It is hard. I was getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was sitting and sketching before I go to work. At the time I was at work, I'd have an hour break, and in that time I'd start, drawing that sketch on Affinity, and then when I come home, I would take a break, and I'd do the same thing the next day. And on my days off, I would get up at 8 o'clock, and I would just work solidly, illustrating again and again and again and again until I had enough to post for a week's worth of content. And it was hard, and I gave myself too much stick for everything that I did, and I ended up getting into a state where I was in a burnout.
Right.
And that's when the biggest problems that every designer has is creative block. And you just end up producing. I've got probably, I don't know what, 70, 80 of pieces that I just never finished.
Really?
Because I just didn't like them, or because I was in such a bad frame of mind that they were just crap.
That's interesting. I don't think, like I've said in like podcasts before, that I don't personally suffer with creative block to the extent of like other designers. I don't know whether it's because I'm a lazier designer. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to put that sort of like. I'm just happy with if work. I don't want to get it to like. It's not that I don't want to get it to perfect. It's just like I'm very easily pleased with my work, so I'm like, yes, this will do, or like, and then I'll get feedback, and then it gets taken a step further. I'm like, okay, I've done what the feedback has sort of gone. It looks better. That's nice. Send it away. I'm not want to sort of like dwell on a piece of work until it's like fully like perfect. I know there are quite a lot of designers that I know actually will sort of fine tune every curve, every stroke, every color. They'll rethink. And I think that's great. And I want to be more like that. I want to get my work more perfect, or like to a point where it's close to perfect. So like, what are your takes on that? Do you try and get everything to finish, or does creative block just then like sort of say, no, this is not going to happen? Or do you like try and push through that and try and get something finished to a point of where you're happy with it?
I mean, there are times, where I've just pushed through and I have come out with things that I have inevitably liked in the end. But I think part of it is, I know for some people you can be your own worst critic. And I think that's the hardest thing to get over for a lot of people. But I mean, when I do an illustration, when I'm on the sketching sort of phase, I'll take it to the iPad, and then I will redraw it and redraw it and redraw it and redraw it before I do any vectorization. Just because I want to, when you're working with things like, drawing hands and feet and stuff like that, if you got one finger that's too big, it just looks weird.
Yeah, I've been on that end where I've sort of done a little bit of vector illustration in my time, not to the detail or in the along the same style as you, but you will do like a vector or a sketch and just go, and then you'll take a step back, you'll spend ages on this sketch, and then you'll look back and just go, yeah, that's not it. And then you'll you won't even like attempt to fix the first sketch. You'll just move on and just try again. And I think that plays part and parcel of developing a style, and also be like, yeah, this is not good enough for me. This needs to be better. And I think that's good that you've set sort of like almost like an expectation of where it's like, this is sort of how I'm envisioning my work. And if something's not right or something's out of place, if I'm noticing it, like someone else is definitely going to notice it as well. Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's because I'm picky, or because, or I try to see the imperfections in things. Which in reality, like, to be perfectly honest, one person's imperfections, or imperfections, quote unquote, is inherently part of their style.
Right.
Because it's those little imperfections that make up who you are. Because going back to what I was saying, and this is going completely against what I just said about me liking to make things right, is that imperfections also make you human.
Yeah,
because you're not going to get perfect every time. It's impossible. If you draw a circle 1,000 times, you're still not going to get it perfect. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah, in the book that I recommended on the first podcast, Still Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, there's a page in there that is just full of like 5-pointed stars, and at the bottom of it says like the human hand is incapable of making a perfect copy. And it was just sort of like the idea of like you are, even if you do try and copy someone's work, you're not going to get it exact same as they did. Like you're going to do it your own way.
Yeah.
Which sort of links in what we've been discussing today as well.
Yeah.
So obviously on the situation of and topic of creative block, when that comes along, are there steps you take to sort of come over it? Do you have to step away? Do you have to like completely stop altogether? Do you take like little breaks? Like how does that work when creative block comes along?
There's two ways I tend to go about it. The first is to step away completely.
Mm-hmm.
Step away, do something different. By all means, remain creative. If you've got another creative outlook, go play an instrument, go read a book. Just take your head out of that equation, because you're in the wrong mindset for it. Go away, come back a couple of hours later, and then try again. The other thing I do, if you don't want to step away from it and you still want to keep creating, is to redesign something that you've already done. And try to take a really far back. And like I did with on my Instagram, the cactus that I did not long ago. Mm-hmm. I did that at the start of lockdown, and I only did that a couple of weeks ago. And it's good then, because your creative block is no longer blocked, and so you're also then recognizing what improvements you've made. Mm-hmm. Or how your style is adapted over time, or you also get to see, obviously from somewhere like Instagram, you get to see what sort of feedback you get from people and how that changes how your page then starts to evolve. But I definitely go back and recreate things you've already done in whatever style you're now doing, or use the skills that you've gained over this time to try and better yourself. Mm-hmm. That's how I deal with it. I mean,
to put a bit of a visual on what Nick is talking about, I'm just going to share my screen real quick of a video that's on his Instagram. I hope you don't mind that I'm going to do this, Nick.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. So there's that. So this is the old cactus, and then is that using Affinity?
Yes.
Yeah. And sort of like the new cactus. So you can sort of see the different change in style. How long ago was the first cactus drawn?
If you give me a moment, I'll find out. Let's go. I think it was definitely this year. I know that much. Mm-hmm. This is the only problem when you post consistently, is it takes ages.
You got so many to go through.
So now this was only the 16th of May. So in what, 6 months, 7 months, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important though to look back on work and know how you've changed and how you've developed and stuff. My most recent vector illustration, I spent a good few hours on it. I just like put some music in and just went for it and just got it done in an evening. And then I compared it to one that I did. I think it was just under a year ago, and like on the first one there was like no shading. It was literally just block color put together. It looked like someone had put together just like bits of like cuts of paper and just put them on each other. And then this one was sort of there was different shadings. You could see bone lines and like redness in the skin. And I just looked back and was like, yeah, this is I've improved, and it felt good, and it almost is like it was almost reassuring to me to look back and go, actually, I am improving on my work, and I am developing. But because at the time it doesn't actually seem like you're changing anything. Has that changed for you? Like, and doing processes like that, has that changed sort of like your bit of thinking on how you've developed?
Yeah, because I mean, the one thing that is hard is obviously you do get following will say things like, great work and stuff like that. But it's a self mindset that you need to be comfortable with your own style and your own work. And if you struggle to find I was trying to think, if you're struggling to sort of think about your work and whether you like it or not, it's always good, like you said, to go back and redesign something and think, actually, yeah, I have evolved and I have gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a fruitless effort. Because I got to this point at one point during the last year or so, and I kept designing, and I felt like, because I hadn't gained anything in terms of clientele, I thought that I wasn't doing good enough, when in reality it was putting a downer on me because I wasn't getting any work. But the reality of it was it just wasn't happening at that time.
Right.
Whereas and then you sort of question yourself, like, oh, am I actually good enough to do this? Is this something that I should be doing? Should I just give up?
Instant imposter syndrome. Like, am I good enough? Am I really?
Yeah, exactly. And you start to question a lot of things, and this is where the low points come into this industry, and you do need that self-reassurance every so often, just to go, I am doing good.
Mm-hmm.
I am getting better.
Yeah.
And it's the same with clientele. You get one client a month, great. You're doing something right.
Yeah. Is that how you? Is that how you value your success, depending on your clients or depending on your workflow? Is that or is it completely different? Am I pulling that out my arse? Is that?
No, not particularly. I mean, success comes in many things. Success could be 1 million followers. You're successful. But for me as a freelancer, obviously the end game is I want to make money. I want to live. So to have a client, even if it's one, it's something. And, and then I start to build connections with people in that sort of regards as well. It's not just about people who are like-minded. It's the people I work for as well. And I want to build a connection with them. And then some of these people are no longer people I work for, but they become friends. And that's when they'll come back. And, then you have that sort of longevity. And so one person a month is something that you can start with. And if you get 10 people a month, brilliant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think you should always aim for one.
Aim for one and see what happens, right? It's interesting. Someone who we're having on the podcast next week, his name is Andy, and I've done work for him, and he's a musician. And me and him met through a mutual friend. And because I've done work for him, one of his friends in the music industry has come to me for other work, and I've been able to go back to him. I'd like to call Andy like a regular client of which I go back and do work for, and the work that we do together and the opportunities that I've had to design. I've done poster designs for him. I designed his latest album cover, that sort of thing. I wouldn't have had those opportunities otherwise, and we've actually formed a friendship because of it. So it's like it's all about building connections. I don't know if Ross said it on the podcast, but we've certainly had the conversation before where he said he doesn't view when someone says building connections with people, it's not about the people in the business. It's all about a friendship and building friendships with each other, and those different pods of friendship. So if you were to move to somewhere else, you're going to meet a completely different pod of people compared to what you've moved from. But you're still going to know people in both pods, and those people are going to know different people, and those people are going to know different people. It's sort of like that butterfly effect style of it's not what you know, it's who you know. Do you agree to it to an extent?
I think when it comes to working for people, and it is all about having that connection and becoming friends, because it is a lot of word of mouth. People will turn around and go, this person did this for me. Really great guy, check him out.
Yeah.
It's the same with like bands. Have you heard of this band? No. Well, you should. They're really good. You know, and I think when it comes to working with people, I don't think people should use the term working for people, because at the end of the day, when you're working with a client, it is more a collaboration than it is I'm doing the work, you're telling me what to do. You know, collaborative. I suggest things to you, you suggest things to me, and vice versa, and then you come out with a product that you're both happy with.
Yeah. When I've had people approach me for work, I've always made that quite clear. As like, it's not you know, it's a two-way road here. Like, we're going to be working together on this. I'm going to suggest things to you. You push back as much as you like, and then we're going to find some middle ground here of which we can both agree on. Because at the end of the day, I think both designer and client do need to be happy with it. I think the client probably has a little bit more control about actually like the final outcome, depending on payment time, all these different variables, right? But yeah, for sure, it's something that I want to get across to my. If someone was to come across to me and say, "Hey, Max, I need you to do this for me," I was like, "Okay, yes, I will do this for you, but I need you to understand, like, I value this collaborative process. It's not just you tell me what to do. It's I need you to be invested in this as much as I am." And in order to work together, because I think that way beautiful things can be made.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in terms of like when you work for people, do you have like a structure of how you do things, or?
Great question. It develops a little similar to style. It will develop over time, and it has developed quite a bit depending on who I've spoken to. There's friends that I've spoken to that I speak to a little bit informally because I know them already. However, if it's someone I don't know, I'm very cross the T's, dot the I's sort of thing with them, just to get them across, like, I am being professional about this. It's not just I'm like just doing this because I can.
Yeah.
You know, I do generally care about it. So normally what I do, if a client comes to me and says, "Want to do work for you," I say the whole thing that I just said about, you know, working together in this creative process. Depending on what it is, so let's say for this instance that it's a logo, I charge by the hour. So, and normally, because I've done logos in the past, just through personal projects and for university and all these other stuff, I say this is the amount of time that I've spent on logos before. So this is how much it is roughly going to cost you. Does that fit into your budget? I don't even ask them what their budget is. I just say, like, this is my hourly rate. This is how many hours I spent on the last logo. This is what it looked like. I send them examples of work so they can see the sort of style that they might be looking for. Obviously, they're coming to me for a certain style, or you know, they want. If you're coming to me for a logo, chances are it's probably going to be minimal, simplistic, and is going to work well wherever you see it. Hopefully, I mean, that's the aim, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if they're happy with that, then I go back with some sketches. They agree to. I send them. I probably do about anywhere between 3 and 6 sketches. Probably more if I've got the inspiration to do so, or if I've got a lot of ideas. I'll be like, okay, here's this in this certain style, but there's also, I tried this with like this sort of imagery or these sorts of colors. Let me know what you think. Then they'll come back to me. We'll agree on a sketch. I'll design it digitally. I'll send them a digital design. It's like, here's a digital workup. Is there anything that you want changing? Is there anything that you have seen on the sketch that you want on here? And just sort of have that back and forth, have that conversation between, okay, what are we liking here? What are we not liking? Is there anything that needs to be taken away? Anything needs to be added? Is it living up to what you've thought? Is it something completely different? Have I made you think in a different way? And so it's sort of like making each other realize things that we might not have realized beforehand. And just that whole process. And I'll let them do that as long, because obviously it's hourly, right? So if they want me to spend longer on it, they're paying for my time. So, you know, if they're happy to spend on it, but I have also had clients that have come to me and said, I only want to spend this much. And I was like, okay, so because I charge by the hour, I'll only spend that amount of time on it. Is that okay? And I've been able to create something within that time frame and they be happy with it because it's something that they just needed it to work for them for, an Instagram post. They needed it to work for just a cover on Spotify, that sort of thing. They just needed it to work for that specific purpose. They didn't need it to do anything else. And for me, that's perfectly fine. If you want quick, but also it's quite important as well. If someone comes to me and says, I need this doing, and I'm not the person to do it, then I instantly pass them on to someone that I know they can, because they're going to believe and value that so much more.
Yeah.
Because if you turn around and say, I can work a DSLR camera, but I cannot take a good picture for the life of me. I'm going to send them over to somebody else that I know. I'm going to send them over to Zach. I'm going to send them over to, whoever. If I've seen someone post a good picture, then I can recommend photographers. I can recommend illustrators. I can recommend, hardcore brand designers. If I don't want you to come to me and it be a dead end. I want you to come to me and be like, okay, this is who I recommend. If hopefully they can do something for you, and if not, they probably know somebody else who's better than they are. So go figure. So yeah, great question. Thanks for asking that, because it's not really I get to share something. But I understand everybody's process is going to be very, very different, and it's just working out what works for you and what works for the client. And literally, I think the idea is make like the first client that came through to me and was like, I needed logo designing. I literally just made it up on the spot. I was just pretended to know what I was doing, and then hopefully it worked, and it did, thankfully. And then just developed from there. So when the next one came through, I looked back at old messages and emails and whatever I'd sent to them, and just be like, okay, so this could be improved on. Okay, that sort of works. We'll probably use that again. We'll use that sort of framework of messaging again.
I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier about if I was to go back to university, I would have liked to have done business, because then I would have had that knowledge on how to approach people in that way.
Yeah, it definitely helps. It definitely helps to have at least a basic understanding of how to approach those sorts of things, and how to deal with certain questions, and how to talk about money, and how to come across confident enough to not oversell yourself, but also not undersell yourself either.
Yeah.
I think that's all just in communication as well. And I think just a general, at least for me, like general terms is just be as honest as you can, and just don't lie to the client. Like I said, if they're going to come to you and say, I need this, and you can't provide that for them, let them know someone who can.
I think the hardest thing I've learned is not to undersell yourself. That's a very hard topic. I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, what should I price? What should I charge people?" And like, charge them whatever you like.
Yeah.
Charge them what you think your time is worth.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was first deciding that, I literally, like, someone said to me, I was like, how much do you reckon that you should get paid per hour if you're going to get paid by the hour? And I literally just plucked a random number. I basically took what I was earning in my part-time job and doubled it. And I was like, yeah, I'd probably pay double the amount. How much would you come to, put yourself in the client's shoes? Like, how much would you pay if someone was to come to you and do it? I just plucked that number out of midair and went, yeah, that probably works. And then like a year later, I upped it just a little bit, just because I felt my style had grown and I felt my experience had grown as well. So there was sort of like a moderate, increases in price and that sort of thing. It's I don't know. It's just sort of like I'm making it up as I'm going along, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but it seems to be working out. And I think if you were to ask any designer, even the top designers like on Instagram and, in business and that sort of thing, they probably started out just going, it just sort of worked out. They don't really have a definitive answer for you. It's just like, I made it up as I went along and it worked out okay.
Yeah, I think that's the large part of it. I mean, I've had some people come up to me before. I had one person say, I want a logo. I was like, cool. This is how much it's going to cost you, because I work on flat rates rather than hourly.
Yeah.
I said, this is how much it's going to cost you. And he turned around to me and went, yeah, but the Nike logo, was it the Nike logo? I think he said something like the Nike logo only cost $20. And I was like, That's cool. I said, but the Nike logo was also made many, many years ago.
Yeah.
I said, we're in a different age now.
To me, that's just not an argument. It's just like
I said it may have cost $20, but look at how much is it worth now?
Yeah. If someone coming back to me and said, yeah, but the Nike logo is was this much when it was first made, to me they obviously don't appreciate design, 2 understand the value of a logo, and 3 probably are of the understanding that a logo is your brand, which it isn't. So if they're coming back to you and just be like, oh, I think that's too much or whatever, just say, well, you obviously just don't value my services as much as you thought you might have done. So go find someone else. Maybe here's someone that does it for free. They're not going to do as good a job, perhaps, or don't.
No, this is exactly what I say to people.
Yeah, go ahead and change your mindset for me. Then come back, and then we can maybe just talk about something. Is probably what I would say to them. But yeah, how long have we got left? We've got about 10 minutes left. It's going well. It's going well. We've spoken a lot about inspiration. We've spoken about creative block. We've spoken about inspirations. The creative industry for you, Nick, obviously because you're a freelance designer, is this something you want to be pursuing for a decent amount of time? Is this, or do you reckon you'll ever move over to an agency? Or because obviously you mentioned previously in the podcast that you were fed up of working for other people and wanting to work for yourself. Is that something that still is going to stay true for a few years, do you reckon? Or do you where do you see yourself in a few years' time, do you reckon?
I personally would like to work in my own comfort zones. Just because I think I'm at a point now where I've been doing this. I've been working freelance now for a year, just over, and despite all the hard moments and all the breakdowns and all the hours and hours and hours put into it, I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. Right. And to be honest with you, it was what I wanted to do when I started university. I said at the start, I want to come out at the end of this and do freelance. And and I think if it came to it, I would probably go and work for a firm. But at the same time, I'd probably do it under a freelance jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So rather than being an employed, I would just go in self-employed and do the occasional bit of work that they don't have the time to do, and sort of collaborate with them in that process.
Yeah, there's a few agencies that will, if their work, so obviously they'll have their base team, but if their workflow becomes too much, so if they've got a lot of projects at the same time, then they'll try and hire freelance graphic designers to sort of take up the work for them, and just to help them out a little bit, whether it might be like simple projects, or it might be something full-fledged projects, and that could turn, and you never know that one might turn into, but again, that links into networking connections on like who you know and who's contacts on how they. So yeah. So Nick, do you want to go ahead and recommend your book that you brought to the podcast for you today? So who's it by? What is it about? Talk about that.
I haven't read this book in quite a while, but it was a very good read when I bought it. This is a book called "Oh Shit, What Now?" And nice. As it says on the book, honest advice for new graphic designers. And this is it's by Craig Oldham. Craig Oldham, and it's just a realistic, no beating around the bush book about what happens when you go out into the real world and how to deal with clients, how to set up your portfolio. What if I make a mistake? And it's the stuff in here that I found interesting was just it's what has helped me now in terms of what if I do make a mistake, and I have made mistakes. I'm only human. It happens.
Right.
But and there's stuff in here that helps with that in terms of and it teaches you how to set yourself up slightly as a business and what you think should be, it's more towards like I think logo designers more so than like vector illustration, but it teaches you the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a couple other books like Know Your Onions, which is also really good.
Yeah, I've got that one. Know Your Onions is good.
And How to Be a Graphic Designer Without Losing Your Soul.
Oh, what a book that is! I think there's a lot of books in sort of that are catered towards creatives like ourselves, and they're just a bit. They don't beat around the bush. They just say things how they are, and that sort of thing. Like it's very practical advice almost, in just like this is how things are. This is probably what you'll come across. These are the sort of clients that you might deal with. And that sort of thing. And I think a lot of sort of like self-help books are like that as well.
I think as a budding designer in the creative industry, I don't think you want books that, this is how you do this drawing. This is how you do this drawing. You can look at books like the Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, that those are specifically to help you with mental block issues. But when you become a designer and you want to do freelance, or you want to go and work for people, then you want to know what are the shortcomings of it all, and my favorite bit about this book, for example, is it appeals to me in the sense of my Instagram feed is obviously very colorful, but it's got nice big colorful pictures and typography, and it's just really satisfying, perfectly laid out,
beautifully printed. Look at that.
Yes, it's a lovely book.
Cool. So speaking of colors, my recommendation is The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia St. Clair. And it's sort of I don't know how to, like a color Bible, if you will. So the beginning bit is about like the history of color, where it started being used, how we see different prints and that sort of thing. And then it's sort of, I don't know if it shows up as well on this, but you can sort of see how it goes from like yellows, whites, blues. So it's like a whole glossary of different color types. And so there's one called, if I can find the page, it's called Tyrian purple, and it's a purple dye that the Romans used, but it was made from like sea snails, and like I think 250,000 of these like little sea snails have to be crushed just to make one drop of this dye. So it's like only to be used by the highest in command, and to be worn by empresses and queens and that sort of thing. It's a really nice book just about the history of certain colors and how they were originally used, their pigmentation process, and how they're used now, and just sort of how we appropriate and semiotically use colors nowadays compared to what they were before, and how they sort of still hold some of those connotations in which we sort of like recognize to be so dear to us. A really great book, a little bit funny as well at times, just like some of the stories are ridiculous in there, and just like a very honest read. It's really well referenced as well, so if you do want to read anything more, there's a huge reference list at the back and like throughout the book. So Nick, just as like a final question, what advice, so let's say someone's just left university, or they've left a college course or something like that, what advice do you have for them if they wanted to go into freelance design like yourself?
Get on social media. It's number one. Be consistent, and don't let people put you down. And most importantly, don't let you put yourself down, and just put your work out there. It doesn't matter if you've got 1 follower or 1,000 followers. There are people out there who will like your work. Don't value your self-worth by the amount of people that like your work. You'll just set yourself up to fail. That's and just enjoy what you do.
Honest words from honest designer. Fantastic. So Yeah, I'm going to end it there, guys. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully, this conversation has opened up a little bit of value for you and for the people that have been listening. There's been a few people like dropping in and out of stream as we've been doing this. So, just to outro it a little bit, this is hosted by LifeProof, which is at LifeProof UK across all social medias. So go make sure you're following that for updates on Creative Corner and youth networking and opportunities and that sort of thing. Lots of stuff coming within the new year and also heading up to Christmas as well. So look out for that sort of thing, depending on what we're doing. We might be doing like live streams and podcasts and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, you can follow Nick on social media, which he's had on his name tag for the whole stream, which is at yeschef.design. Yep, you got it. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Next week's podcast is not going to be on Sunday. It's going to be on Thursday instead. I'll update the social medias on all of that good stuff. But until then, guys, stay safe and we'll